No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato. Before we get into this segment of America's Third Watch, I want to touch on the epidemic of denial that is metastisizing in the United States when it comes to politics. It's actually quite serious. It wasn't too long ago that the uninformed among us, those who opined about politics without knowing the facts on any given matter, those who based their opinions on emotions rather than evidence, truth, and fact, were but a scant few. They were the outliers, the ones you could almost rest assured would find themselves too busy to vote on Election Day. Those days are gone, long gone. With the subverting of truth on almost all social media platforms and the mainstream media complex's need to whore itself out through those platforms for risk of dying off, truth and fact have given way to emotion, fear-mongering, and outright lies for a great many people who do vote. A case in point, after posting one of my latest pieces, Is the Democrat Party now the party of war, or is Biden wagging the dog, on a popular social media platform, one reader responded, "Lies, lies, lies is all I see. Biden is a clear winner. No matter, he isn't fixin' to go to prison like the Natzi German freedom hater." Unquote. Aside from awful punctuation and grammar, and don't get me started on the spelling, it is beyond obvious that facts and truth didn't matter to this commentator. The only thing that mattered were his emotions. Each point made in the piece was noted and sourced from scholarly and well-documented sources, but he either failed to examine the facts or just couldn't be bothered to consume accurate information that proved him wrong about what he wanted to be the truth. This is the kind of intellectual ignorance that directly threatens the continuation of our constitutional republic. When voters are so fickle that they insist on ignoring the facts in deference to their emotions, it opens the door for manipulators to manipulate, deceive, and capitalize on that deception purely for the acquisition of power and control. This is the 39% of the electorate that would vote for a fence post rather than admit that all of the smear and exaggeration the media and political opponents are throwing at Donald Trump are just that, smear and exaggeration. They want Trump to be the villain because their propaganda outlets have drilled that concept into their heads. The facts, evidence, and truth be damned. We stand at this point in time because the manipulators and opportunistic charlatans of the political class have fed us the wholly disingenuous idea that it's rude to talk about politics or religion with family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. It's not rude. It's how we understand that we have more in common than in difference, and they hate that. It's how knowledge gets disseminated. Engage in productive conversation, in the exchange of thoughts, information, and ideas. That's how our republic was born. It wasn't born because we didn't discuss politics, and it certainly wasn't born because we didn't acknowledge a natural law entity higher than ourselves. Life is ensconced in a constant battle between good and evil, whether the issue is personal or public. When truth, evidence, and fact are rendered irrelevant to the discussion of good and evil, then the republic is lost. And with the loss of our republic, freedom is but a word in a history book. Talk to your friends, family, neighbors, and colleagues, those you meet socially, about politics and religion. You don't have to be a raging asshole about it either. Be calm and know what you're talking about by arming yourself with facts and points of evidence. Speak the truth. But don't be afraid to admit when you're wrong. But talk. Productively engage with your fellow Americans. It's how we preserve the Republic. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station WGUL AM 860 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
When someone is having a stroke, every minute counts. Just as putting out a fire quickly can stop it from spreading, treating a stroke quickly can reduce damage to the brain. The clock begins ticking as soon as you spot the signs of a stroke, because some treatments can only be used if the patient reaches the hospital in the first 3 hours after symptoms appear. So don't wait. Call 911 right away and get the person to a hospital immediately, even if the symptoms go away. If you think someone is having a stroke, remember the word FAST. F is for face. Ask the person to smile and check whether one side of their face is drooping. A is for arms. Have the person raise both arms and see if one arm drifts downwards. S is for speech. Ask the person to repeat a short phrase and notice if their words sound slurred. And finally, T is for time. If you spot any of these signs, call 911 right away to get the person to a hospital fast. Strokes are medical emergencies. The sooner a patient gets treatment, the better their chance of a good recovery.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Happy Monday to you, and it's been a very interesting Monday, to say the least, with these European elections, so much so that French president has now dissolved the parliament, the Belgian president is now resigned altogether, and everybody's kind of going, what the heck just happened?
Well, you can't abuse your population ideologically and expect them not to demand change. And that's what's happened in the EU. They've been forcing through a far-left agenda for quite a while now. And it's affected people's pocketbooks. It's affected people's freedoms. It's affected their culture with the inundation of migrants and refugees. And the people have had enough. And they've signaled that at the ballot box. So I say good for the EU.
Well, indeed. In fact, I mean, you've got Macron, as I said, he dissolved the French parliament. Basically, he's looking to try to shore up his own support, ostensibly. But yeah, this is, I think, filtering over here. And I just wonder what the Biden administration or the Biden campaign in particular, think about. Now, wait a minute. I mean, all these issues are the same issues that Trump is championing, and they've only got a few months here now.
Well, for the left in the United States, in their political communities, European elections have always been a bellwether, so they have to be concerned about this. That said, the people of the United States have been saying the same things the voters of the EU have been saying for the entirety of the Biden administration, with the implementation of these far-left, ridiculously far-left policies that they've put into place. People are angry about gas prices. They're angry about food prices. They were angry about the supply chain issue that could have been rectified much earlier than it was. They're ticked about taxes. And they've had enough of wokeism and all of the policies related to wokeism. People are tired of hearing about special interest agendas. I don't know anyone in the United States who's vehemently against the rights for gay people. But it seems like every 5 minutes there's another special day or another special initiative that bestow upon that demographic, which is not a large number in the United States, especially the trans movement. Whenever you talk to the White House, they're always injecting this into things. That's just one of the far left special interest groups that have gotten undue attention from this White House and this administration, and the far left in the Democrat Party, where regular rank and file people are feeling ignored. Even though we protect the minority here in the United States, you can't ignore the majority either. Right. And in a country where over 60% identify as Christian, these people feel like they have been cast to a second-tier status. Everybody's supposed to be equal. We're all supposed to have opportunity. All of our rights are supposed to be protected. We're not supposed to be hobbled for special interests, and that's what the far left in this country has failed to understand. That's why all the polls are pointing towards Donald Trump, such as it is.
Well, you mentioned that word equality. That's a very different thing than the other word that's constantly used by the administration and many in the far left, which is equity.
Right. Equity is the equal outcomes. So it doesn't matter whether you deserve it or not, you're going to get it. Equality is being equal in opportunity to excel. And the left has tried to put that on its head. But remember, equity is a founding tenet in Marxism. And you and I have been saying this ever since we started talking. This country's far left is Marxism. Mm-hmm. They are Marxist, and they are pushing a Marxist agenda. It has trickled in so slowly that we're suffering from the frog in the pot syndrome. We've got Marxism in the United States today quite potently in government, and we've allowed it to happen because we didn't recognize it when it started to take root.
Right. Exactly right. And unfortunately, then you've got a whole group of younger people who've come up through the education system, both in school and in higher education as well. And it all makes perfect sense to them sometimes. Oh, yeah, it needs to be more like this, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because capitalism has been demonized. The founders have not been taught correctly in the schools so that people understand what individualism is to freedom.
And I have a feeling, by the way, that this whole idea of nullification might just become a little bit more important especially as we head towards this election, but just the way that things are going. This is one of the reasons why we have to have a good outcome this November, because otherwise, and Frank will bring you back in here, otherwise the states are going to be put in a pretty bad position. Good morning again, Frank.
Mr. Kyle. Well, yeah, it's the states need to have a backup plan, and that's why I wrote the book, Nullification. When you read the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers, and you understand the debate that took place over nullification, it wasn't to nullify constitutional law. It was to nullify unconstitutional law mandated by the federal government. On that, they agreed they couldn't get rid of the idea of nullification because you needed recourse to despotic federal government. And even now, people like Mark Levin have started talking about nullification, although he lays heavy on you can't nullify constitutional law. He's right. You can't nullify constitutional law because we all signed on to that pact that is the Constitution that created the Union. But when the federal government, as in COVID, a lot of people would argue that it applies to undue taxation as well. The progressive tax system that they have in place that was ushered in by the far left all those years ago, you do have a recourse when the government overreaches. It just takes a state government and leadership that has a spine. You have to be creative and intelligent. You have to be able to take away the despotic federal government's ability to punish through the reallocation of the tax dollars that you paid into the system. So, yeah, elections have consequences. If we can get a sizable victory for the presidential election and then take both houses of Congress, we can start righting the wrongs through the legislative process instead of executive order, which is being abused today by both sides. And we can start codifying some of the things that are needed to correct the path of the country. If not, you need to have that ace in the hole that is a state government that understands they do have a recourse through nullification.
Well, indeed. And that's part of a safety mechanism, but what it is, it's about actually upholding the Constitution, not subverting the Constitution, as some might want to try to frame it, basically.
Right. It's not a revolutionary act to say that our state is going to have fidelity to the Constitution and you've overstepped, Mr. Federal Government. That's not revolutionary. That's preservative. That preserves the compact because we all signed on to this contract. Remember, the far left in this country, the progressive neo-fascist left, they believe that the Constitution is malleable, that their idea of a living document is that it's a set of strict guidelines instead of mandates for the federal government. That's something that was ushered in with Woodrow Wilson and continued under Franklin Roosevelt and every leftist president since, especially Barack Obama and especially Joe Biden. They think the Constitution is a list of loose suggestions that they can take or leave. That's not the case. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights, those two documents specifically, limit what federal government can do and reserves everything else to the states. And we've gotten away from that dramatically in the last 50 or 60 years.
Well, isn't it interesting that the GOP, the conservatives, let's say, or just the Republican Party in general, is always framed as they're the ones who literally want to be a dictator over you. Whereas the conservatives typically are doing exactly what you're saying. They want to limit the things that government can do, but yet the left always wants to expand the things government can do and essentially rule over you. I mean, sometimes I think it's so stark that I can't believe that sometimes people fall for that whole, like in the latest iteration is Trump's going to be a dictator in day one, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I just got finished writing an article come out, I think Tuesday or Wednesday about the comments that AOC made over the weekend about he'll probably throw me in jail. He's going to destroy the democracy. The left always needs to prey on people's emotions when they have no accomplishments to actually point to.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what's happening. They're telegraphing what they do, what they think, and what they want to do upon their opponents, and then as they condemn them for doing those things, they actually do it. And that's just proven through history all the way back again to Wilson. So, we need to be prepared going forward, not only for this election, but for all elections to come, to understand their messaging systems. There was a piece I wrote last week, what we need to do to prepare for the general elections, that talks about Bernays and Lippman and Alinsky, and then highlights some of the major messaging tactics that they use that lead to the deception of an electorate. We need to be able to see it and understand it when it's happening so we can call BS.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think also in that article, was that also the one talking about the down ticket voting, which is so important? Yeah. I think that was the article that came directly after that. Right now, when you look at the polling, the bump that Trump got since the trial, which is averaging out to be about 10%, and he's in the lead. That's not translating to down ticket races in the House and the Senate. When you look at the generic votes in many of the polls that are out there, the Democrats are going to maintain their majority in the Senate, and it's going to stay the same in the House. We can't have that. We need clear majorities in both chambers. Otherwise, the Trump presidency will be hobbled, and it'll have to rely on executive orders again, which I said before, both sides are abusing.
We're not supposed to be ruling by caveat from the executive branch. That turns into the idea behind a monarchy where the leader decides. We can't have that. The executive branch is supposed to execute the laws that were crafted through the legislative process. So, that's why we need the majorities, and that means people need to show up at the ballot box and need to make sure all their friends and family show up at the ballot box.
Indeed. Well, in fact, this is a very serious thing about the down ticket voting. It was interesting, though. Emerson College, a recent poll, puts Biden ahead of Trump in the state of New York by 7 points. And there's an interesting article in the Daily Mail that says this puts Trump within striking distance, oddly enough, of taking New York, maybe the first time since Ronald Reagan. Do you think that's a real possibility here?
Well, Emerson was one of the polling institutions that was most accurate the last time around than the time before that. So you do have to give a little credence to that. I would be shocked if New York goes for Trump, but a 7-point margin is not insurmountable. There's something wrong in New York. The people of New York, especially after watching the despotism that came out of Manhattan in this trial, which any thinking human being knows just stunk to high heaven. We got to start questioning, why do you think this way? Have you gone full-blown Marxist despotism? What is it? Because these decisions and the voting patterns that keeps coming out of New York City and New York State are something you would see in a despotic dictatorship in South America.
Yeah. Well, see, that's exactly the thing. And they're just sort of waltzing into this thing like, this is just Tuesday for us over here on the left. I mean, it's incredibly concerning. So what do you think about this, the drug test request? I mean, they're not going to say yes, but at least he's putting it out there.
It's a good tactic to call attention to it. I mean, I'm not sure it needs to have any more attention focused on it. You're just listening to Joe Biden on any given day shows you that he's in steep cognitive decline. I truly believe it's tantamount to elder abuse, what Jill Biden and his handlers from Obama 2.0 are doing to this guy. But yeah, he's got every right to mention it and ask for a drug test before the debates. I don't know whether it's Adderall. I don't know, Ritalin, what they're trying to use, but they do juice him up before an important speech and important events. And, that's just not right. That means the handlers of the most powerful man in the world, or someone who's supposed to be the most powerful man in the world, are drugging him to get the outcome that they want.
Yeah. Yeah. This is big time. Yeah.
It's serious. I mean, we joke about it because he looks like a babbling idiot most of the time when he gets in front of a microphone, but Joe Biden's had that kind of a problem most of his career. He sees a microphone and he goes off the rails because he likes to embellish. He was caught plagiarizing several times. As a matter of fact, one of the people who reads pointed out that his D-Day speech this year plagiarized from Reagan's speech back in the day. So he's not without the malady of embellishment when it comes to the truth. His relationship was loose.
Oh,
with
yeah.
The truth.
And he used to drive an 18-wheeler. His uncle was eaten by cannibals, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, and he's said some things that are, if any other candidate said them, it would end their careers. I remember he called Barack Obama a clean black man.
I do remember that.
And
that's right.
He mentioned that every Indian in the United States owned a convenience store.
Right. Yeah. Something you had to have an Indian accent or something. I mean, these were devastatingly bad things to say. That you're right. I think would end anybody else's career. For obvious reasons. He also said that he knew Vladimir Putin for over 40 years. Yeah. I'm not so sure about that. That seems pretty fantastic.
He does have a penchant for sniffing children's hair.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't forget about that. I mean, that's also just creepy.
And we shouldn't forget the bigger thing here, because we're hitting on the obvious things that people go, what did he say?
Yeah.
But when you look at the statements that he's made in an official capacity, the guy was a segregationist.
Yeah.
He wasn't for the Civil Rights Act. He said that he didn't want his kids going to integrated schools. I mean, how does that not end someone's career? But yet he's been allowed to get away with it, and he's been almost Teflon in the public eye from the Democrat Party in Delaware forever.
Yeah, because now he's being used as the figurehead, in that sense. And I think they figured out, hey, we can do whatever we want with this guy. He'll just read what's on the teleprompter.
Absolutely, and if he doesn't, he'll come up with something so ridiculous people are left scratching their heads.
Indeed. Well, Frank, do you feel like taking a couple of phone calls this morning?
You bet.
Okay, here we go. Anthony in Tampa giving us a call. Good morning, Anthony. You're on with Frank Silvato.
Hey, good morning. Marxists existed way before Barack Obama, but he pretty much laid out the blueprint that festered all the angry and, groups that have taken advantage of this present administration. You got BLM. You have the radical alphabet stealers groups who are just dying to have their month. They want month after month, day after day, to acknowledge their abnormal sexual lifestyles to the point where they want to take it into incorporating, indoctrinating young people. You see it in sports. I just saw the beginning intro to the Celtics Dallas game, and you noticed all the players, just a few, had their hands on their hearts. Otherwise, they're still making a stand against the United States, against the flag. They still have that festering, disgruntledness against this country. And then you saw it in the women's national soccer team, where they pretty much disrespected our flag. Yet, who is to blame? The fans are to blame. Those who supposedly profess to be American citizens, all gung-ho for the American flag, yet they tolerate and they fund these groups, these teams. Enough is enough. You got to decide where you're going to stand. You're going to support anti-American teams or individuals, or you're going to defend the United States of America and the founding fathers. This whole white hatred, and I'm not white. I'm not European. I'm not Caucasian, but people need to wake up. And it's like they're giving the whiteness this moniker of being white supremacists. Enough is enough. People need to stand up and oppose this ridiculousness of this 1619 garbage. It's just way out of line. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, Anthony. Appreciate the call. What do you think, Frank?
No, he's right. I mean, what the left has done, what the far left progressive, and I use the term neo-fascist because that's what they are by definition. It's not name-calling. It's accurate. The neo-fascist progressives of this country, the far left, they've realized that all they need to do is balkanize us while they're not pushing accurate education in the schools, and they can divide our country up into ideological, racial demographics that they can cobble smaller groups together by pandering to them to 51% to win elections. So you have a populace that is largely uneducated in why capitalism works and is preferred. The only economic system that's ever created a middle class in the history of man. You've got uneducated people who believe racism is systemic in the United States. No statistic points to that whatsoever. None. Nowhere. From the left or the right. It's just a media narrative. So they balkanize the people into little factions and then pander. And you want to see a perfect example of pander? Joe Biden's doing it with the border policy. Oh, suddenly he found the power to do this. Did he tell us like 2 years ago he had no power to do anything about the border? It had to go through Congress?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Well,
and then suddenly it's an election year.
Yeah, suddenly he found that power, didn't he?
Exactly. Well, we got about a minute and a half where we got Backgammon Bob giving us a call. Good morning, Backgammon Bob. You're on with Frank Salvato.
Yes, Frank. Who do you think will be the best vice president choice? Marco Rubio is supposed to be up there, and then Bergram and Tim Scott and that lady too.
Yeah, and for me, it's a little bit too early to look at because the problem with naming it this early is the baggage of any missteps by the vice presidential candidate gets attached to the candidate itself. So I'm more of a fan of it being unveiled.
Which one do you think? Which one do you think of those?
My jury is out. Being a Floridian, I would of course support a Marco Rubio candidate, but you have to look at the swing states where you need to bolster the candidacy. That's been traditionally how the vice president has been picked. If you've got problems in a certain state, you pick somebody who comes from that state so that you can garner the votes from the popularity of that person because they've already been elected by the people.
So which one of those comes from? Which one of those comes from a state that we might need?
No, it's you can make a case for all of them. I'm going to respectfully refuse to point out who I think would be a good vice presidential candidate because it's too early. But they're all strong people, and Tim Scott's up there too. I mean, he's a strong candidate for vice president. If you like the podcast, please rate it and comment if your platform lets you. Go over to undergroundusa.com and subscribe to the Substack, and pick up your copy of Nullification, available on Amazon. But more importantly, talk to your friends, family, colleagues, and acquaintances about politics and religion. Do it calmly and employ facts over emotion. You'll be surprised how much you have in common with a great many of those you talk to. It's something we can all do to preserve the Republic. My name is Frank Salvato, and you're listening to Underground USA.